The Secret Science at Work by Max Freedom Long. Chapter 24. The Secret Meaning Behind the Crucifixion. And now we come to the great and awesome drama of the crucifixion. Its mounting series of events, exemplifying man's inhumanity to man, and leading to the tragic climax, have held the minds and hearts of people down the ages. As such, its outer meanings alone have exerted an incalculable influence. But the recorders of the drama have couched it in such terms that we are able to discover the deeper hidden meanings, which reveal it as the final summing up of the things Jesus came into the world to teach. The mission of Jesus was to make each individual aware of himself, know what he has to struggle with in himself, and how to deal with it, and to give him a promise of the shining goal ahead when he had achieved the union with his own high self-Father, which he could and must do. He was not concerned with the tribe as a whole, mankind, the masses, as was Moses. Jesus knew that when each individual was a truly integrated person, the matter of society, composed of such individuals, would take care of itself. According to Huna, the consciousness of each individual, in brackets, the middle self, is a spirit which lives as a guest in the body to help and control the low self, and also to gain its own growth through life experience until permanent contact with the high self is attained. Its major duty is to guide and teach the low self so that the latter may progress from the animal level of consciousness to that of the man or middle level, or the middle self level. We must know that the animal or instinctual urges of the low self are very strong, and rightly so, for the preservation of the race. But there are times when the middle self must control even such an urge. This is exemplified in the outer account of Jesus in Gethsemane, the garden to which he and his disciples repaired after the Last Supper. The event occurred before Judas betrayed him. Jesus went apart to pray, telling the others that he felt exceedingly sorrowful. He fell on his face and prayed, "O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt." The low self in the body of a strong, healthy young man will put up a fight to save the body. It is making a plenitude of mana, and it loves life. Jesus, if this is what troubled him, could not overcome it. The first time he prayed. Let me read that sentence again. Jesus, if this is what troubled him, could not overcome it the first time he prayed. The first time he prayed. He went back to his disciples and told them, "The spirit," which is his middle self, "the spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." He urged them to pray also against such temptation in themselves. He went away again and prayed, "O my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me, except I drink it, thy will be done." After an interval, he muttered the prayer again in the same words. We recall that the Kahunas said that an important prayer 3 times should be said in the same words. This time he conquered with the help of the high self and came back to his disciples again serene and told them to sleep and rest. We should be quite satisfied with this outer meaning, and there is certainly much to be learned thereby, were it not for the important word cup, which Jesus asked to pass away from him. It has always been assumed to mean the cup of bitterness, the cup of poison we meet through literature. And so it is in the Polynesian language, and there is a word for it, pai. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's spelled P-A-I. It is not the cup, ki aha, we have discussed more than once as symbolizing the sending of mana as a fountain to the high self along the aka cord. Pai, the cup of bitterness, gives us entirely different meanings, which broaden the scope of what the incident was supposed to exemplify. We must remember that Jesus was cleansed of all fixation sins in the low self even before he was baptized. He proceeded in his ministry completely in touch with his high self Father. He lived a life of hurtlessness, and he taught it as a way for others. He taught the importance of the individual. He preached the inherent dignity of man. It must also be kept in mind that he had foreknowledge from his high self of exactly what was to happen to him. In detail, no doubt. He was prepared always to fulfill his prophecies, but it can be believed that when the revolting details of what was to come appeared before his mind's eye, they were staggering. Pai, then, the cup of bitterness, reveals three inner meanings. The first is to scourge. One of the most degrading and humiliating things to be done to Jesus later was the scourgings, first at the hands of Pilate, later by the soldiers who mocked him and spat upon him. The second secret of Pai is to mingle blood and water in one mixture. After Jesus hung on the cross, a spear was thrust into his side, and forthwith came there out blood and water. The third meaning is to speak evil, to slander. If ever a man was slandered and unjustly accused, Jesus was after he was arrested. With these meanings to help, it can be seen clearly that what troubled Jesus, so that he had to pray desperately for help, was not only the instinctual urge of the low self to survive, but a far greater fixation caused by the very work he did, fine and noble as it was. He so believed in the dignity of man that he could not bear to see it insulted. This seems to be the final temptation of all great spiritual workers, a sort of spiritual pride. It is significant that he warned his disciples against the temptation. So, having dissolved this fixation through the powerful action of his prayer, repeated thrice, Jesus went through the next few days of almost incredible calumny, injustice, and brutality visited on him, and maintained an extraordinary dignity through it all. He was to weaken only once, and that was when, half conscious, on the cross, his low self sent out one last dying cry to his Father, which was so touchingly human. In this trial, Pilate could find no fault with Jesus under the law, but for reasons of political expediency, he turned him over to the importunate chief priests and elders to do with as they wished. They wished to be rid of him, for his presence and his teachings We're drawing entirely too many people away from their established, dogmatic, and profitable temple. So it has been with the bigots always, in any religion, in any place, not to speak of political bigots. Among the chief priests and elders were rabble-rousers who incited the mob to demand that Jesus be destroyed. Even now, nearly 2,000 years later, people in civilized countries have not learned the lesson this incident in the drama of the life of Jesus portrays so graphically. Hitler could still incite mobs of educated people to do violence against the Jews he hated. With the bloodthirsty cries of the mob to back them, the chief priests and elders demanded that Jesus should be crucified, and Pilates so ordained. It was a usual procedure in that time to execute criminals in this manner. They were nailed to the cross and hung there until they bled to death, which took long hours of agony to accomplish. Jesus then, after a series of insults at the hands of his captors, was given his cross to bear, wearing a crown of thorns they had put upon his brow. He was forced to carry the cross a long way to Calvary, where the crucifixion was to take place. With him went two thieves, bearing their own crosses, who were to be crucified at the same time. The mob swarmed around Jesus on the tortured way, reviling and scoffing and insulting him, though his faithful followers, especially the women, wept forlornly. Somewhere along the way, a young man from the country was pressed into service to carry the cross for Jesus for a distance, though Jesus resumed the burden as they approached Calvary. We are not told by the writers of the drama just why this happened, but we may be sure that there is meaning to it. The Via Dolorosa, the way of the cross, has been part of the procedure of worship in the Roman Catholic Church through the centuries and is today. The scenes are pictured in sometimes beautiful paintings hung at intervals on the walls of the churches. They are called the Stations of the Cross, and the worshippers pause before each one to pray. The cross surmounts each building, from cathedral to small chapel. It is attached to the rosary, handled by every individual during his prayers in the church and at home. The figure of the dying Jesus on the cross is everywhere, in pictures and sculpture, even in the humblest homes. For most, I think, the symbol of the cross means little, except as a physical stimulus to act as a reminder of the dogmatic theology which Jesus died for the remission of their sins. The first Protestants, in their zeal to destroy anything Romish, cast out the cross, but we see it coming back little by little to surmount the steeples of their churches. It is a symbol worth preserving when one understands its wealth of real meaning. The cross was a basic symbol among the Polynesians. As I have mentioned elsewhere, in the ancient days, the Huna initiates placed a cross of wood before the entrance of their holy or taboo places as a form of King's X, to warn the uncleansed not to approach. It was the symbol of the uncleansed who were afflicted by any of the several kinds of sins. The holy place was the symbol of the high self and the entrance of the path. The language contains two different words for cross, each containing the hidden meanings which reveal the truths that the cross symbolized. The first of these words for cross is kia, K-E-A. Its secondary or inner meaning is to obstruct a path and prevent one from traveling it, to hinder one's progress in any way, to force or compel one to do something against his will, to get one into difficulty. This meaning gives a very complete description of what the eating companions force one to do, also of the fixations as they block the path and prevent progress. It is a little short of amazing how the Kahunas managed to perpetuate their knowledge of man's makeup, to show what caused the difficulties and how to surmount them. The language of the Polynesians is peculiar, that a variant of a word is often used, which gives even further pertinent hidden meanings. Thus, the variant for kia, K-E-A, is pia, P-E-A, which is a part of the word for fan, F-A-N. Piahi, P-E-A-H-I, already discussed. From the roots of pia, we get first to anoint. This is the symbol of one who has successfully carried his cross. In other words, it is one who has managed to gain control of his low self and to get his aka cord unblocked. To anoint was a form of cleansing, a ceremonial or ritual form. The Messiah was one who had attained the state of union with the high self through cleansing. Jesus was certainly a Messiah in this sense. The Greek word for anoint gives us the title most used for Jesus, the Christ, or the Anointed, to use the English form. And second, we get from the basic root, P-E, to break, a symbol of the process of destroying the fixation thought form clusters. The carrying of the cross, then, is the Huna symbol for the successful accomplishment of the training of the low self, so that it is brought into line with the good and kindly life which must be lived before full contact with the high self can consciously be made and kept. It is the promise that by so doing, the three selves will function as a single unit to the end that the normal and progressive form of life can be lived. The symbology of the cross itself, the material object, includes the picture of the pitfalls included in the process. The upright post of the cross represents the aka cord, rising to the high self from the low self, and the bar which crosses the upright represents anything that causes the cord to be blocked, and the flow of mana to fail to be sent upward to the high self. There is a special word in Polynesian for the form of cross used in the crucifixion. This is amana, A-M-A-N-A. The reader will instantly note that familiar term mana and will know what it means. So when we find a secondary meaning of amana, a cross is to offer food or any sacrifice to the gods. We know that what was offered to the gods or high selves was not actually food, but mana sent along the aka cord. However, as I have just said, the crossbar of this cross shows that the mana cannot be sent successfully when the aka cord is blocked. This fact may be seen in the other three meanings of amana, which follow. Number 1, to drive one to do evil, pointing toward eating companions and their obsessional powers and influences. Number 2, to cause illness. This is one of the results of the contamination caused by blocking the path. Number 3, a cluster of things. This is the symbol of the thought forms of memories. In this case, because of the association of other bad meanings of the word in question, we see that the memories containing fixation-causing events are indicated. That Jesus knew and used this Huna symbology of the cross is apparent early in his teachings when he said in Luke 9:23-24, "If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me." Certainly he would not have urged others to suffer the crucifixion as he suffered it later and daily to make things more impossible. He was giving the teaching of what the cross symbolizes and urging that the effort towards union be made daily. While we are considering this passage for the sake of the word cross in it, we may as well pause to see what is meant by deny himself. The word deny is, in the sacred language, hulamana, with these meanings: HOO-LE-MANA. Number 1, to deny, as to deny the authority of one over another. This is the outer meaning, but it is the most illuminating when we change the rather vague word deny into the Huna word. The low or animal self-will or authority is what must be denied daily. It must be controlled. Number 2, from the roots LE and mana, we get to cause mana to fly upward. This is the inner meaning and symbolizes the fact that the goal of training the low self is to get it under control, to make it join in living the good life, and to teach it to make the mana fly upward along the Aka cord to the high self when commanded to do so. Now, let us return to that scene on the way to Calvary. We have noted there the unexplained act of another man bearing the cross for Jesus part of the way. It undoubtedly happened, but the initiates who wrote the record knew the symbology of the act and were careful to preserve it for that reason. We can certainly see it, knowing the meaning of the bearing of the cross as a dramatization of the person who helps to remove fixations, as in the foot washing rite. Other significant symbols crowd the mind. Jesus wore a crown of thorns. We have already told that thorns are the symbol of fixations. He was accompanied by 2 thieves who also were to be crucified. The word for thief is ayahu or ahu. Aihu? I don't know how to pronounce that. Let me spell it for you. AI-HUE. The root I means food, and the root hu means to steal. These 2 combined root meanings show that the thieves represented the eating companions. The root hu also means a calabash, and so refers us back to the cup symbol. Another meaning is to flow out as water, which is the symbol of the spilling or the loss of mana, caused by the evil spirits which live invisibly with men, feed on their life force, and drive them to evil deeds. Arriving at Calvary, Jesus was nailed to the cross. It was raised upright so that he might hang there in agony until death set him free. In the sacred language, to hang on at the cross is li Pika, L-I-P-E-K-A. From the word li, we get these inner meanings: to hate, to abhor, to be filled with wrath, to be jealous, to be proud, haughty, to disregard the rights of others. These meanings describe the unregenerate low self and the attitudes towards others, which are the very sum and substance of the fixations and obsessions which cause symbolic crucifixion with all suffering it entails. Jesus was crucified between the two thieves. In the account, we are told that one of the thieves repented his evil ways, and Jesus promised to help him toward salvation. The other remained evil and unrepentant, and nothing could be done for him. For this, we see illustrated the Huna belief that those who die unrepentant and uncleansed and cut off from the blocked path remain in the same state after death and haunt the living as eating companions when they find in the living those with like evil propensities. These will eventually progress and learn the lessons and will be able to receive help, but until they become ready, they must share the agonies of the cross, which are brought on by their evil and by their blocked paths. After his death, Jesus was taken from the cross and laid in a new tomb. The word for tomb is Elina, I-L-I-N-A, in which the root lina gives the secret meaning, which is to tighten or stretch as a cord or rope. And here we have the indication that the death on the cross symbolizes the point in progress at which the suffering caused by evil comes to an end and the progress into the God life begins, with the Aka cord being freed of knots and tangles and opened. The word for new, N-E-W, in the phrase a new tomb is hou, H-O-U, which has for one of its meanings that of to extend. This is a symbol for reaching out along the Aka cord to make contact with the high self. Death, Maki in Huna, M-A-K-E, means a transition from one kind of life to another. It also means to be made right, fitting, and proper. This is the inner meaning of the death on the cross, or the end of the period when the low self is out of control and is evil and savage enough to attract and harbor evil spirits. In death, the evil spirits have no more mana to feed upon, so they leave. If the individual has reached the turning point into good ways, the fixations can more easily be broken down and progress begun in earnest. The great stone which closed the tomb, the symbol of the stumbling block, was rolled away by unseen hands even while the women who had come to the tomb were saying, "Who shall roll us away the stone from the door of this sepulchre?" In this again we have evidence that the high selves can remove even the most powerful of the obsessing entities, even the Lord of Darkness. Jesus had risen from the dead. The outer meaning of the resurrection is that he rose and appeared to his disciples to prove that one does survive death. In Huna, resurrection is Ala Hua Ana, A-L-A-H-O-U-A-N-A, which gives the secret meaning in its literal translation of to open the path anew. The inner meaning of the resurrection, then, is its promise of ultimate victory over the symbolized evil and death on the cross, and the restoration of normalcy and progress through the open path and full contact with the high self. The fact that Jesus actually did return and talk with his disciples after the death of his body has been ignored and disbelieved in our world of materialistic thinking. No doubt the theology that, as an aspect of ultimate God, anything was possible for Jesus, and only Jesus, to perform sufficed in the Christian churches. To perform sufficed in the Christian churches. But when one inspects the work of the kahunas with spirits, casting out the evil ones and securing the help of the good spirits, one becomes more and more aware of the progression of life, beyond the short span of which one is conscious in the body. The common people among the Polynesians sense the presence of spirits, and to them it is an accepted and ordinary part of life. They have no fear of the so-called supernatural. It is natural in their experience, and they treat these visitations casually. Quote, "My grandmother just passed the banyan tree over there. Have some more poi, will you?" Close quote. In the Western world, spiritualists and researchers into psychic science have proved quite conclusively the continuance of life after death, even after a large amount of fakery has been drained from the experiments. It is a compelling and vital climax to the life and the teaching of Jesus that he should return for a brief period before going on in the greater life of the Spirit. In Jesus, we see a man who had learned the lessons of life and who had attained perfect union with his own high self-Father. We see in him one ready upon death to progress a step higher in the scale of life and being. If we accept the ancient Huna beliefs on this point, as on many others, we may believe that after his ascension, Jesus passed through the graduation or transitional stage, and the middle self, Jesus, rose a grade to become a high self. His low self, at last, taught the ways of man and the necessity of ceasing to react as an animal, rose to become a middle self, undoubtedly experiencing rebirth into the new physical body with a new low self for a companion. The Father, so loved by Jesus, and who was one with the great and shining company of Amakuas, would, according to Huna, also rise a grade and become one with the Akua Amakuas, who stand one grade higher than the great outpouring of life that comes from the vastness of the ultimate, which moves slowly upward. We can only suppose to the source of which all come. One of the last things that Jesus said when he returned in spirit to his disciples was, "Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world." This promise and the love and the warm and selfless personality of Jesus has endeared him to men and women down the ages by revealing the Huna meanings in his life and teachings, and by setting forth the common sense belief, as attested by everything the Huna initiates wrote about him, that he was one of the greatest human beings who ever lived. I would not wish for a moment to destroy that loving sense of companionship with him. For me, brought up in a fundamentalist type of Orthodox church, against whose doctrines I early rebelled, this study has returned Jesus all the more as a man to be loved, to be revered, and above all to be followed. Quote, "Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world." End quote. He is still with us, as close as our own high selves, because he is one with them in the great company. We may still pray in his name, for that is at the same time in the name of our own high self Father, and as the ruling passion of Jesus while living on earth was to serve and teach and help and guide the lost sheep of the world, we may be very sure that any slightest aid or comfort or guidance we offer to the least of these in his name will draw us closer to him and the shining company with whom he now labors and continues his ministry on a different and wider level. We are living in one of the periodic times of world upheaval, which means drastic change and progress. To many of us, it appears that the world is being crucified, and there is no reason to fear and despair, for there are signs too of a new and golden age ahead. The time that was prophesied so long ago appears to be at hand, the time that man can begin to understand himself and so individually to work out his salvation. No matter where we stand in our evolutionary process, there can be joy and health and success for each according to his needs and capacities in service. The promise of salvation still stands, just as certain, just as bright, and just as clear as it stood 20, yes, even 25 centuries ago, when Isaiah spoke in the veiled words of the ancient secret, crying out in the exaltation of his vision, quote, "Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. Then shall the lame man leap as an hart, H-A-R-T, and the tongues of the dumb sing. For in the wilderness shall waters break out, and the stream flow in the desert. The parched ground shall become a pool, and the thirsty land springs of water. In the habitation of dragons, where each lay, shall be grass with reeds and rushes. And an highway shall be there, and a way, and it shall be called the way of holiness. The unclean shall not pass over it, but it shall be for those, the wayfaring men, though fools, shall not err therein. No lion shall be there, nor any ravenous beast shall go thereon. It shall not be found there, but the redeemed shall walk there, and the ransomed of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with songs and everlasting joy upon their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away."